Today is February 11th, and on February 11th of 1939, a researcher named Lise Mietner published the backbones of nuclear fission for the first time. And she published it in Nature magazine with her nephew, Otto Robert Frisch, and this was really important scientifically. But my Lise Mietner story for today has something to do with that Nature magazine publication, because I want you to understand the context that she published that under, right? So a couple years ago, my kid was at the library, and she found a book in the children's juvenile nonfiction section titled "The Woman Who Split the Atom, The Life of Lise Mietner." And this is a kid's book. And she was like, I want you to read this kid's book. And she's like 6, right? And I know this book's a little advanced for 6, but like, we roll with it. I'm a little nervous because nuclear annihilation like stresses me out as like a concept to talk to kids about, but like I'm here and I'm like ready to do hard talk. And that was not the hard talk that we had to have while we were reading this book. As an Austrian researcher in Berlin, Jewish woman, 1920s and 30s. She published that important piece that was published on February 11th of 1939 under the context of just having like gone through some stuff. And that stuff includes that she got her PhD in 1906, and then immediately, like basically in World War I, went back and got X-ray technician training and anatomy training so that she could work as a German, essentially a nurse in the military. And then came back and began doing research in Berlin. And the research that she was doing was all about kind of atomic structure. And slowly but surely, the walls are closing in on her, right? It starts, they talk about this financially, and my kid like totally picked up on this, and like we continue to talk about it in the grocery store today. Like every time we talk about food inflation costs, she's like that woman in Germany, because in the book they talk about how her faculty paycheck was no longer enough to feed her. So she had a faculty paycheck, but that faculty paycheck was not enough to like keep up with the cost of food inflation. So she was doing her research hungry in some cases. But also the rules started getting tougher and tougher. So she lost her faculty position. In 1933, the laws were passed that would have made her lose her faculty position, except that she was extra protected. She had served in the German military. She was not a German citizen. She was an Austrian citizen. And she had been in that position for a long time. And so she didn't lose her position in 1933, but she did lose it in 1935 because they started tightening the restrictions, right? She did not lose her research position. She lost her faculty position. She lost her department position, but she was allowed to continue her research. So when Austria was annexed into Germany, her Austrian visa was no longer real, right? So when you look up her Wikipedia, it actually says that she was stateless for a number of years because she was no longer a citizen of anywhere. And the problem was that meant that she was still in Berlin. She was like in a basement of a research facility doing her research. And every time she tried to leave, or people had tried to get her out, she couldn't leave without all of her stuff, because her stuff was her life, right? Her research was her life. She couldn't leave. And in 1938, finally, she hit the wall of realizing that she was in big trouble. She had been allowed to publish up until the last couple of years as a Jewish woman in a specific journal that had still had a Jewish editor. But Springer, the same Springer that publishes and controls research publication today, that she was no longer allowed to do research, to publish research, right? She had been publishing with an editor named Berliner, who was German and was Jewish. And Springer came in and actually fired him and said no more Jewish publication whatsoever. She starts trying to get out. She has like a whole team of research scientists strewn across Europe that want her other places. She's brilliant. She's brilliant, right? But they can't get her out. She agrees to take a position in Stockholm, and they say, no, you can't leave. You're not leaving. Your visa is not valid. You are a Jewish person in Germany, and that passport no longer works, and you're not leaving. And she's stuck. And other researchers realize that there's a problem. There's a guy named Kostner, and he is in his own right like a brilliant physicist, but he gets on a train and goes back into Berlin from the Netherlands and gets her. And basically they meet the next morning. She leaves all of her notes, all of her materials, all of her science lab stuff. She leaves with about $40 current era in her pocket and gets on a train, and they go to the border of the Netherlands, and she is just a little woman sitting next to this guy, and they assume that their best guess is that they assume that she's the wife, because they don't even ask for her visa because she's traveling with no things with a man. They let her leave. She gets to the Netherlands. From there, she ends up going to Sweden and hanging out and doing research by kind of a miraculous last-minute escape. Her nephew, who was the co-publisher of this thing that got published today in 1939, is Otto Robert Frisch, is the one that goes to Los Alamos and figures out that prompt criticality. So, and that's the conversation that I ended up having with my kids after we checked out that book, because the story is not actually about, it is about the bombs and what the bombs did, but it's actually about how while she was doing this incredible research, the walls are closing in and she's not able to get food and she's not able to move freely. And she has to leave her research lab in the middle of this thing that's unfolding as a Jewish woman in Germany. The book, The Woman Who Split the Atom, if you don't read juvenile fiction, juvenile nonfiction regularly, I totally encourage you to. It is magic how good juvenile nonfiction can be at getting you a bunch of information, telling it in an engaging way, and what would be a 400-page book that would be incredibly dry if it was written for adults can be a weekend read if you're reading it for a 14-year-old. So just a shout out to the JV section at the local library. All right.